Welcome to this week's episode of the Prep Athletics Podcast. I'm proud to have on returning Coach Alex Popp. Now, Alex Popp used to be at Vermont Academy, and then he was spent the past 5 years at IMG Academy down in Florida. And just recently, he got hired to be the new head coach at the Winchendon School in Massachusetts, which is in the NEPSAC. So we do a lot of catching up, and we talk about his program at Winchendon, the benefit of summer exposure events and open gyms, how he does development, what the academic load is like during a post-grad year at Winchendon. He discusses playing time. Should you be on a team that's really good and not play as much, or should you be on a team not as talented to get minutes? All this kind of stuff that families are asking me on a daily basis, we really dive into. And it was good to have Alex back on to share how excited he is to be back in his home state of Massachusetts. So thanks for tuning in and enjoy this week's episode of the Prep Athletics Podcast. Welcome to the Prep Athletics Podcast. This is Cory Heights.
Some battles. I'm not sure if they got us. If they did, maybe.
So you will get better as a player during that year.
So it was kind of exciting. Like, oh yeah, somebody wants me.
Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Cory. Let's go.
Yeah, good to see you again. And we're having you on now because you left IMG after being there for 5 years, and you're now at the Winchendon School. And just talk us through what led you to making this decision.
That's right. Back in the NEPSAC, Cory. Large part of the decision was based on becoming a new dad and wanting to be closer to our in-laws. And then the other dynamic was this opportunity presenting itself and feeling like a perfect fit, right? And the timing of it, where I am in my career, felt like I'd never been more ready for this. And, deep down I've always, as you know, have an affinity for NEPSAC basketball. So it feels good to be back.
Yeah. Now give us your pitch on Winchendon as a school, and then what you're going to have there as far as the basketball program goes.
Right. Winchendon School, intimate, awesome community, 60 miles from Boston, and kind of in the center of the NEPSAC universe is kind of the way I describe it. Our proximity to our opponents could not be more ideal. And, it's an intimate community, a little under 300 students. And we have successful athletic programs across the board, ice hockey, baseball, both boys and girls basketball have had a, tremendous amount of success. So, classrooms are 8 to 10 students. So, yeah, it's a pretty intimate environment, and, there's a lot to sell there.
Yeah, I love it. Now, what are you bringing from your 5 years at IMG? What are you bringing from that experience that you're going to incorporate now into Winchendon?
Great question. So I think that my experience at IMG is going to serve me in this new opportunity, Cory, just based on, the experience and the wisdom that I was able to kind of pick up along the way from being around the likes of, Brian Nash and Mike Gillian and Mike Kelly and Kevin Sutton. And I could, go on and on and on and on. I think, all of the experienced coaches and mentors that I had down there is really going to serve me now, based on, finding a way to, make people around you better. I think that's the best way I could describe it. That's the role, that's the responsibility. We would always say teamwork makes the dream work down there. And, now I'm a firm believer of that. Whereas maybe before my experience at IMG, based on, where I was in life and where I was professionally, I definitely felt like I was a little bit more of a maverick,
Now, when you get to Vermont Academy, you took that program to the next level very quickly. You had a lot of talent in those teams. You won right away. What's your approach going to be at Winchendon now? Like, do you want to follow that same trajectory? Are you trying to ease into things? Like, what's your vision right now?
To be as good as we possibly can in a way that makes sense for the student athletes that we're serving right now. We're going to have opportunities to have, a tremendous amount of talent on both the boys and girls side. but keeping two hands on the steering wheel, 10-2, and making sure that we don't compromise with character, discipline, academics, and passion, right? So if that takes us a little bit more time because we're not willing to compromise on those dynamics, we're comfortable with that. And, we're going to be opportunistic. You know that, Cory.
Yeah. So tell me this, what are you looking for in a player? So families that are and coaches that are watching this right now, like what is your ideal player for your team?
I would say family and a student athlete who does not shy away from, building up the relationship the right way. And that looks like a lot of conversation, communication. It looks like, film study, kind of nitpicking transcripts, and really just spending time with the family and kind of understanding if there's going to be, if it will be a good marriage, right? Because joining a prep school campus, regardless of how talented or how high character you are, it is a transition for young people, right? So just being able to know that, the circle of support is going to be, available for communication, and then also knowing that, the kid is going to be a contributor to the campus, in more ways than just on the basketball court. You tie all that together, and I think, it gives you confidence to go after it.
Yeah, love it. Now, you left NEPSAC right when COVID was happening, and now you're back 5 years later, right? And the world has changed in 5 years, and our the college basketball ranks and placing kids, portal, NIL, the game getting older, stuff everyone talks about in this podcast, and we talk about offline. And where do you see NEPSAC now? Like, is it as strong as it was 5 years ago? Is it, do we need to make adjustments based on how the college landscape is now? Like, now that you're back in NEPSAC, you're going to be breathing it, living it, competing in it. What are your thoughts on it now?
I think it's definitely case by case, Cory. Now it's not going to be the same as 2016 or 2020. I get that, and I think all of us are a little romantic about the way college basketball used to be, especially us older coaches. I'm 40 now. I consider myself one of the older coaches. But while we can, feel nostalgic about the way things were, it is our responsibility to attack kind of what we can control. And while a high major Division I recruit might have to, deal with mid-major recruitment in this era, or a Division II player might have to, look stronger or strongly at Division III. I think case by case, you want to, remain in that space where you're controlling what you can and going from there. I always tell the families that we're working with that bird in the hand is better than two in the bush, and opportunities at the next level are precious. So given the circumstances, I think that college placement, college matriculation is definitely going to look different, but the what won't be compromised is kind of how much work goes into it, and building relationships. Those are the two most important things.
Yeah. Now, I'm making you the mouthpiece for NEPSAC here, and I know you're just fresh back in it, so forgive me on this. But if you're a top 100 or 200 player in the country, and you've got the options such as going to NEPSAC or going to Overtime Elite or some of these academies that are popping up and getting national attention, like, what are the benefits now in 2025 for one of these players to go to a NEPSAC school?
Great question, Cory. So I think I wouldn't be wearing Winchendon green if I didn't believe in the conference and the NEPSAC, right? And I think where we separate ourselves is the depth of our schedule. And what I mean by that is if you're looking at what it takes to be successful in conference play at the Division I level, SEC, ACC, Big Ten basketball, it takes a lot of preparation. And I think because of the depth of the rosters in NEPSAC and the talent of the coaches, the experience of the coaches, it forces you to prepare differently, prepare like you will at the next level, whether it's college or pro. And I think that in comparison with other top conferences around, the country for high school, prep school basketball, there are no off nights. There's no cupcakes on Winchendon School basketball schedule. And that forces the young people to, prioritize the coaching, prioritize the preparation, the scouts, in a way that, is so consistent. It gets them ready for the next level. So I think that's our big separator, Cory, is NEPSAC basketball forces you to prepare with more consistency than anywhere else in the country.
Yeah, because some of these bigger time programs out there that are not in NEPSAC, they might have a lot of games in their schedule where they're winning by 40 or 50 points. And just there's not as much parity there, right, as you have in the NEPSAC on a nightly basis, right? So I think that's important. But tell me this, right? So when you were at Vermont Academy, you went from AA to AAA, right? And now at Winchendon, you're at AA. Tell me this. Does it matter as a player what class you're in, whether AAA, AA, single A, BC? Like, walk me through this because it's a big question we get from families quite a bit.
Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with AAA, AA, or single A. And I think that each coach has a little bit different of a philosophy with scheduling. And I think that, the two pillars of a successful prep school program, Cory, kind of recruiting and scheduling. So aligning kind of the student athletes fit with the scheduling and the recruiting, like the rest of the roster, I think is most pertinent, and it's case by case. I think some kids will flourish best in a roster where, they can have a high usage rate and they can be a player that, anticipates 35 minutes a game, whereas other players might flourish better, competing for a rotation spot. And then, the scheduling part depends on where you are, right? I think you're going to be challenged at any NEPSAC program for scheduling, but, some programs are, like Winchendon School, like we want all the smoke, right, Cory?
Right.
So I think it depends on, the coach more so than the class. And ultimately, we're all trying to win, the NEPSAC conference tournament, but, there's national exposure events outside of that. So I think kind of zooming out of class A, B, or C, AA, AAA, and looking at the programs with their, for their roster and their overall schedule, not just their class schedule, I think that helps add context.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Now, answer me this. We're going to go through some heavy hitters here of questions that parents ask me, just like that one. Playing time. When a family asks you about playing time, how do you answer that?
That because of the nature of NEPSAC basketball, there's a decent amount of turnover every year. Like we're going to take a few post-grads. We're going to take, several repeat sophomores, repeat juniors. However, there's going to be turnover every year. So, the idea of us having the same, rotation from November to March is unlikely. Now, I think if you're on a team that returns everybody from the roster and you won 30 games the year before, sometimes those rotations kind of are more set in stone. But the way that, basketball is in today's world, I think, playing time is earned, and playing time, is something that the coaches can examine with the players in terms of, analytics and, role allocation, watching film. It doesn't have to be the coaching staff versus the player. It can be, hey, we're in this together. And the more efficient you are with your analytics and the more you're impacting winning for your 5-player unit when you're on the court, the bigger your role is going to be. And I'll add, Cory, that in addition to that, developing these young men and women as people, as basketball players, and getting them, appropriate college placement is at the forefront of everything that we do, in addition to trying to win games. So I think that it is an art and a science. And unless you're there every day, it's kind of, one of those things where you have to give trust to the coaching staff and to the administrators at that school.
Yeah, I love it. Now, to piggyback on that, you mentioned recruiting and placement strategy. What is your placement strategy, Alex? Like, I commit to Winchendon, I commit to you, put on social media, pay the deposit, sign the contract. What is then my role as a family and player with you on getting me to the collegiate level? Like, walk me through your process.
So when I was at IMG Academy, we kind of came up with this concept, Cory, that I'm going to steal and use for what we're doing here at Winchendon School. And it's, our job is not to do the actual evaluation. Our job is to help the college coaches do the evaluation, because ultimately they have to decide, what their roster is going to look like, so they can keep their jobs, right? And so they can put food on the table for their families. And I think that kind of takes the heaviness out of the equation, because we're all in this together. If we want to be realistic, we don't want to waste people's time, but if you want to target, blue blood schools, we can at least pick up the phone and ask those schools like what their needs are and if they're willing to, watch film. But I think just like, anything else, it's going to be case by case. And it's going to be based on a lot of hard work and relationship building.
But when this family signs up and they say, like, I want to play D1 and they're a D3 player, like, how do you figure, like, do you walk through with the families? Like, do you want to be on the East Coast, West Coast, big school, small school? Like, do you walk me through that conversation with the families on like how you figure out which schools you're going to even reach out to?
I think casting a wide net's important anyways, right? And we're going to have a roster of 11 to 12 student athletes on the boys' side that are going to be future college basketball players. So the more conversations, the more relationships you're building, the better anyways. And then I think it's pretty difficult to sincerely forecast without spending, a lot of time around the young person, right? A prime example I can give is a young man named Travis Evie up at Vermont Academy, 5'11", below the rim, not like the quickest player in NEPSAC, and a lot of people were saying he's a Division III player. But then over, the first 2 months of school, I saw his approach, his work ethic, his efficiency, his character, the way he approached his relationships with his teammates. And I'm like, this guy's got a chance to play at a higher level than people are saying. So I think, scenarios like that play out. Conversely, there could be, top 100 guys, or, I've worked with McDonald's All-Americans before, and sometimes you get around those guys and they look, incredible in film, incredible in their AAU setting, but, are they an everyday guy? I think so. I don't like to rush to conclusions. And I think that, it should be under construction. And that's part of the exciting part of, prep school basketball is like you get to a campus and you get to kind of earn, who you are. And I'll say that, who you are some of the time becomes who you are all the time. Like the guys that I've coached, and I think I get it right more often than not in the recruiting process. Like we do our best to, attract high character, passionate players. But the guys that make excuses or get distracted in prep school, or complain about their coaches, right? When they get to college, those same things surface, right? So it really becomes kind of a microcosm of the rest of their career. which I think is fascinating. But again, going back to your original question in the recruiting process, like, and when you kind of start working with families, I think having an open mind and like sincerely casting a wide net, I think is a really good start. And I think families appreciate that too.
Yeah. Are you doing that via email, via social media? Are you picking up the phone and calling like your buddies first? Like, walk me through that. And what do you find most efficient in 2025?
Most efficient, I think, is when your roster has, players where the schools are reaching out to you.
Yeah, of course. That's the best, right?
And those are typically the coaches too that are well connected. So they might, be recruiting your, 6'8", versatile forward who just reclassified as a junior, and they're in your gym a couple times as a result, or they see you play, 3 or 4 times in the June showcase weekends. And then they start helping you with other players on your roster. I think, like, in terms of efficiency, that certainly helps. I think, and then I think you want to be a lighthouse, Cory. I think the best prep school coaches in NEPSAC, and there's so many of them, do a good job at, being a lighthouse where they're seen and they're being seen. They're seen and they're seeing everybody else, right? So I think getting to the right events, doing networking, I think that all helps. If you get FaceTime with people, naturally, you're building the relationship better than email or phone. But I think, the approach is very much a 7 days a week commitment. And the approach is, you use all the platforms you have.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. And you would confirm that it's all about relationships in this game. Yeah, okay.
That's right.
Tell me the benefit of the summer showcases, the Scholastic Showcase, and then the open gym period. Obviously, it's changed, but there's still benefit. Talk families through what they're getting when they sign up for a prep school and get to take advantage of those two periods.
I mean, there's no guarantees, Cory, with what comes of those platforms, but there is a guarantee that you're going to be seen by the most, desirable coaches in all of college basketball. And, you can't beat like the volume of coaches that roll through the NEPSAC June Scholastic Live weekends. You can't beat that. And then because there's so many prep schools in a highly concentrated area here in Massachusetts, you get a lot of organic traffic in the fall that I think is really exciting, right? Like if, Syracuse or Stanford or, Florida are your dream schools, well, come to Winchendon School, you're going to be seen by those schools, and more it's more than likely that you're going to be seen by the head coaches of those programs at least once, right? So I think that that's really exciting and invigorating for athletes who are new to the space.
Yeah, and go back to what you said earlier about like coaches talking to other coaches about players. Like if I'm at an open gym and I'm a player and I've got 3 high majors, but I'm not a high major player, but I have a killer performance, these coaches talk to each other, right? And I don't know if families realize that or know that, but can you explain how like the college coaches like help each other out and how they network and how they communicate with each other on players?
Absolutely. And I think a large part of it is because a lot of Division III assistants want to network with Division II programs, right? And a lot of, low major, mid major Division I programs are networking with high major coaches, right? And it's just kind of like that's the food chain. And so and everyone's trying to help one another out. So, there's coaching trees in college basketball, as we know, Cory.
Yep.
And, you can kind of just follow those coaching trees and see kind of who wants to help who. And sometimes it helps them with their top target. There's people doing favors for one another. And I think that It's a lot of fun when a program is, coming in to watch one kid, and before they get out of your gym, they say, wow, that, his teammate, must have had, the most impressive rebounding, night, or, went 8 for 11 from 3. He's not what we're looking for right now, but you know what? We could kind of make a couple phone calls for him. That stuff happens all the time.
Why are college coaches doing that? Is that just good karma? You putting it out there, so hopefully it comes back to you, or are people doing that to get favors, to potentially bump up a job level? Like, what's their motivation?
Both, right? All of the above. And yeah, I think it comes back around. It's good basketball karma. I've already had a couple prep school coaches call me, Cory, and say, our admissions calendar is done. Can you squeeze 1 or 2 more players on your roster? Will your admissions office roll with that? Because we have a guy, and maybe it's a NEPSAC single A program or a prep school in the Mid-Atlantic area. So I think that happens even at our level.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely does. All right. Another huge question families ask is development and time in the gym, right? And it's like an arms race now. Like, hey, at this school, I can get in the gym 2 hours a day. This school, 4 hours. This basketball academy, I can be in the gym 20 hours, right? What do you tell families when they ask you about how are you at Winchendon and you, Coach Popp, going to help me get better? Like, what's the schedule look like? What are you going to do? Do you have assistants? Do you have trainers? Like, talk me through your development at Winchendon.
Well, I think NEPSAC basketball is very much aware of the fact that the Cooper Flags and the AJs of the region went elsewhere for their prep school experience. So while NEPSAC has guidelines and rules, I think us coaches are being as creative as possible, to maximize player development in the most creative ways possible, because it's a necessity, right? Like, prep school athletics have evolved, they've changed. Here at Winchendon School, some of the adjustments that we're in the process of making is having strength and conditioning as a class during the academic day. So you have a 90-minute window where traditionally, you went and did some homework, you got some help. Those are all great things. You snuck in a nap, right? Those are all great things. Now you can bake into your academic schedule strength and conditioning, right? And it knocks it out. And so you don't have to do it at 5 a.m. And then in terms of like off-season skill development, we are going to hold our athletes to a high standard, because that's part of why they're coming here. So accountability with charting the actual work in the gym and holding guys accountable with analytics. Like, I try to say that I do. I'm very much excuse me, Cory. I'm very much a believer of the 30% buffer. If you're in an empty gym and you're on the shooting gun, or you're, getting put through the paces with an assistant coach, you should be going 7 out of 10 on every single, cut or shot that you're taking. You should be shooting close to 70%. Excuse me. And why that is because in an actual game, with defense, with fatigue, with, movement, the stakes are higher. There's going to be a 30% buffer, right? So if you're 70% in an empty gym, you're going to be closer to 40% when it's go time. And if you're 40% on game day, you are a college recruitable shooter. Hopefully you can edit some of that out.
Gotta give us some of those camel lights up, man.
That's funny. No, I blame daycare with a 1-year-old. Our girl Junie comes home with something different every week, Cory. anyways,
Helping your immune system too. You know that.
what's that?
It's boosting your immune system
That's
too. So
right.
just think positively with that.
That's right.
Yeah.
So more player development stuff. I think we got to make it case by case. There's some athletes that, want more and they can do more and it doesn't wear them down. There's going to be other athletes that might be, repeat sophomore, repeat junior, need to put on 15 pounds of muscle, and getting in the gym too much wears them down. So I think being conscious of, every athlete's going to be case by case, but, the best shooters, the most skilled players are the ones that work on it the most. And we are going to pride ourselves in being gym rats as a coaching staff, right? So if the student athlete is as passionate or close to as passionate about basketball as we are, they are going to spend a lot of time in the gym. Another wrinkle that I can brag about, Cory, at Winchendon School, I wish we had this when I was a post-grad, 25 years ago, is during study hall, if you're in good academic standing, 2 or 3 times a week, you can get in the gym and get extra work from 8:30 to 9:30.
Great.
And I think that's a separator.
Cool. Now here's a while you're getting your cough on, here's our here's a question too. This is a chicken or the egg question, right? And I'm going to ask this to you. There are teams where kids can get a lot of playing time, but the talent's not as good. And there's teams where there's a lot of talent, but you might not get as much playing time, right? You, Alex Popp, which one do you think is more beneficial to a kid? And I know it's a case by case basis, but we're talking middle line kid who's probably going to be, between 8 and 12 on the roster, right, for a really talented team, or be the man on a team that's not as talented, right? What do you see as, the ideal path for a kid? Because some coaches say you got to get on the court. Others say, hey, you're only on the court 30 games, right? All the development happens in practice against these better players. So where philosophically, what do you think is more ideal for a kid?
Truthfully, I think experience the best teacher. And I've seen guys do redshirt years, back when you had to sit out for transferring. And I think practice is just not even close to what games are like. Even if you're in the most competitive environments, time, score, the bright lights, the way the game's officiated, the execution of, the strategy. I firmly believe that playing time is the premium. Now, being the best player on a team that doesn't have great culture or doesn't make the playoffs, and doesn't have a lot of tradition, I'm not sure, that's what we're talking about. But being a rotation player or even a starter in a program that has great culture and that has, a good amount of success, I think that's kind of what athletes and what their families should be aiming for. If, the goal is to maximize, progression. Right now, there are programs, both, grassroots and AAU and prep school, that are so good at college placement, right, that you might have a better chance at that Division I scholarship if you're 11 or 12 on that roster versus, 2 or 3 or the top guy on another roster. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to perform when you get to college regardless. So if a AAU program or a prep school program is just, so good at college placement that program gives you a better chance at Division I. I think reminding families that you want to stay long-term greedy is important. So yeah, I fully believe that being a rotation player, is the best path for, getting better. It's also the most fulfilling path.
Got it. Thanks for sharing that opinion because it's varied, right? Walk me through this. If I'm a post grad coming to Winchendon, what are my options academically?
You're a normal student like everybody else on campus. You're not going to be taking a class that you already took. You're not going to be, stuck in a classroom with, freshmen and sophomores, but, you will be challenged academically. There's options for AP courses. There's a lot of different ways we can approach it. Like I said, strength and conditioning can be baked into the schedule. If you're good academic standing, which all of our student athletes with hoops are going to be, there's flexibility to shoot during study hall, but academically, you will take a full course load.
Okay. And you guys offer college credit options or AP is that option?
Yeah, you'd have to score right higher than 3 on your AP exam to have it transfer over to college. I haven't seen that play out too many times in my 10 plus years at this level, Cory. So making sure that the student athletes are in courses that are interesting to them, and kind of keep them on pace, so their routine helps get them ready for the next level. I think that's the priority.
Gotcha. Last big question. What does prep school basketball look like in 5 years?
Good question, Cory. I think prep school basketball changes up here in New England the next 5 years, maybe more than it did in the previous 20. And I think a big part of that is, knowing that we need to continue to evolve to make ourselves as attractive as possible. So the homegrown talent want to stay here. And so the best players in the country and in the world, know that NEPSAC is the place to be. And how that looks, I think will be more creative than maybe, you and I can imagine right now. But I do anticipate a lot of change in the upcoming, 5 to 10 years with NEPSAC basketball.
Yeah. And maybe that means NIL in some form or fashion too. So is there anything, Alex, we didn't touch on that you want to mention before we get off here?
No, I think we covered a lot, Cory. I really appreciate you having me on. Hopefully we, can continue to have these stimulating conversations. I always really appreciate our dialogue. And I think what you're doing has been really great for NEPSAC basketball. So on behalf of the region, we appreciate the awareness that you're creating for us coaches that are, in the trenches, doing what we love. And we appreciate you believing in us.
Well, look, man, I did a post-grad year, it changed my life. You did a post-grad year, it changed your life. So we're just speaking about our experiences and trying to share with as many people that listen that this is an option. And, Winchendon and you are absolutely going to be a new option now with you back in the region. So me and a lot of people are excited to see what you guys are going to do up there. So Alex, you're the first coach to show up the second time on the podcast. So good to have you back, my man. Go Wapiti. Well, guys, if you enjoyed this podcast with Coach Alex Popp, be sure to subscribe on all the major podcasting platforms. Go to YouTube and subscribe there as well, as we have bonus content. And go to prepathletics.com if you're interested in learning more about prep school. Reach out to me. I get back to everyone. We got free assessments on there to see if prep school is right for you. And join our newsletter, where every month we give you the latest insight into what's going on in the prep school basketball world. Until next time, thanks so much for tuning in. Take care.